Ultimately, you are influencing what society becomes and how people evolve. You just don't want to acknowledge it or you don't want to recognize it, but ultimately you do. Now, the problem, once you realize that this is the state of humanity, that we will always be an evolutionary species, at least as long as we're engaged in baby making, is the fact that evolutionary systems converge, especially when you start giving to certain features, especially when you start rewarding certain features, and especially when you start adopting a needs-based approach. If we were to go in a park and look at the squirrels and start feeding all of the squirrels according to their needs rather than their ability to gather nuts, we would find ourselves in 1,000,000 years from now, or maybe in 100 years from now, with a bunch of fat squirrels incapable of caring for themselves, incapable of gathering in nature the foods that they need. And there's a very simple approach to this. It's sometimes you'll see little signs that will say, don't feed the birds or don't feed the squirrels. By not feeding the squirrels, we're trying to leave the evolutionary pressures go onto the birds or squirrel population so that they don't become incapacitated by too much caring, by too much giving. And one of the fundamental issues with socialism, it's not the only one, but it's so grave that it's not fixable in my view, is the fact that its eugenic function is poor. It is poor because of the needs-oriented.
JF is a very good debater. I feel like Lance is just going to try to laugh at everything and say like, well, this is absurd, and not actually respond to anything. But we'll see what happens. Maybe he will impress us.
Approach of socialism. Capitalism has its own way to exclude those who are unable to produce. If you don't make money in some way, if you don't produce something that some other people are willing to pay for, you would have less money and you would have less resources. And although it's not the case in our current society, because our current societies are not fully capitalistic, but in principle, in a fully capitalistic society, you would be essentially dying off from not having resources at all and having little babies. The problem is if you don't have that kind of eugenic function, if your policy is let's give to everyone according to how much they need, which socialism does in one way or another, whether it's through some kind of universal check, some kinds of food distribution to the people or service distribution to the people, you are creating an infinitely reproductive needs function. That is, people are draining your calories. They're making babies with it. They haven't proven that they were capable of gathering those calories. You have just given them through the hand of the government. And eventually you find yourself in the next generation with more poor people, more unable people who are more dependent on the government. And who knows how much time it takes before this system reaches the end. History actually seems to demonstrate to us that it only takes less than 100 years before these systems crash. But it could take more than 100 years, and perhaps a communistic or socialistic society can be stable for 200, 300, 500 years. But what we know is that at some point you're going to reach the problem that you are allowing the multiplication of needs while not incentivizing the addressing of needs.
30 seconds left.
You're not incentivizing it the way capitalism does. How does it do it? Capitalism incentivizes it by saying, if you find a way to address the needs of people, you're going to get money and you're going to be able to use that property in whatever way you want, including the ability to make babies. Communism and socialism do not do this. They incentivize inability. They incentivize people begging to the state without delivering to society. And therefore, socialism is bound to fail in some term, whether it's short or long.
You got it. Thank you very much, JF, for that opening statement. Lance, the floor is all yours.
Middle guy.
I just want to quickly say I will address all the points you brought up, but I just have a prepared statement. So I was going to use that for my first 5 minutes, if that's all right.
As you wish.
All right. So when the last drop of monarchist blood had been spilt at the end of the French Revolution in 1799, the estates were converted into a national assembly, bringing an abolition to feudalism, state control of the Catholic Church.
Oh my God! Wait, what? Did he become a wolf talking box? Oh no! Where's the comic with the little kid and the mom? And the mom was like, "What's that?" And then they see something. It's like, "Oh my God, look away!" And then the kid looks at the mom, and it's too late. And it's like turned into what's there's like a meme format for that I'm thinking of.
For the first time, the ability to vote in a democracy. Promises were made of égalité, fraternité, and most importantly, liberté. Thus began not only the age of classical liberalism, but the age of capitalism. Capitalism has been the prevalent economic system for the past 400 years, despite the promises of equality and liberty. Marx and Engels were able to observe how capitalism at its very core requires the exploitation of labor in order to be profitable. This isn't a matter of debate. In order to make money selling widgets, you first have to sell the widgets for more than you pay the workers who build them. This is what creates different classes in society between those who hire workers and the workers themselves. We've had several dynamics like this in human history: master and slave, lord and serf, and now we have employer and employee. Not that the advent of capitalism got rid of the other dynamics. In fact, they formed hybrids. Capitalism didn't appear in its final form from the very beginning. There was other versions like mercantile capitalism, which is essentially a form of usury. Various forms would appear and die off like economic systems before them. Modern forms of capitalism include both the Industrial Revolution and the riches brought to it by the white race through the North Atlantic slave trade. I use the term white race because it was colonizers who invented the concept of race in order to justify the subjugation of African slaves that they brought over to the Americas to work both in cotton picking in the South and textiles in the North. Hundreds of years of slavery combined with capitalism amassed vast amounts of wealth for a certain subset of Americans. It then evolved again with the invention of corporations, which could insulate the owner from the legal liabilities of his company. Corporate institutions have grown to be the dominant economies of the planet, many surpassing the GDP of entire countries. As these corporations grow under capitalism, they also consume competing companies in the form of mergers and acquisitions, creating complete monopolies in certain fields. And while it may be tempting to insinuate that J.F. Gerepi is unable to read his copy of Mein Kampf because the pages are currently stuck together with his own cum, or that hatred of socialism and communism is because one of the most famous philosophers of those was Jewish, it should be pointed out that it's no surprise that a proud ethno-nationalist would endorse an economic system whose final form is fascism. After all, the dictatorial regimes of Franco, Mussolini, and Hitler all followed a set pattern: an authoritarian salvation of the capitalist system resulting in their oversight over its industries, a longing return to the mythical glory of their empires, a vilification of an entire people as a scapegoat, Catalonians or Jews, a distrust for the lying press, and finally the expansion of Leipzig or promised land in the form of settler colonialism. Corporations have no loyalty to their country of origin. Their loyalties are exclusive to producing profit for the shareholders. This can be seen in a company like IBM that is actually complicit in the Holocaust, developing the cataloging system necessary for the mass organization of the Jewish genocide. If one is to advocate for modern-day capitalism, they are also advocating for corporate dictatorships whose decision-making rests within a small handful of board members and CEOs. As I stated previously, these companies will devour one another until they have complete monopolistic control in their field. It's for this reason today that in America, 9 banks control the majority of wealth and assets we depend on, 8 food companies control all the products you see in the grocery store, 5 media companies control all the movies, television, and radio podcasts we listen to, 3 technology companies control the vast majority of social media in the world, 2 companies produce the vast majority of beer in America. Under our capitalist system, 6 men own the collective wealth of 7 billion people. The myth of a purely meritocratic system in which people advance solely on their talent wouldn't justify this disgusting inequality even if it was true, which it isn't. Capitalism is now resulting in the ecological disaster that threatens all life on Earth, yet the ability to stop CO2 output while pushing for an endless growth in a system with finite resources will eventually meet its catastrophic end. I'm sure it's inevitable that we will discuss the trillions of lives lost at the hands of the communists in China or Russia, but what I will be proposing here today is to look to other economic systems, both from the past and present, and analyze and adopt what is most beneficial to the vast majority of humanity. Any mature conversation about these topics should avoid playing team sports to previous ideologies and ascertaining which aspects are the most beneficial to everyone. In this, I state that no economy is completely giving workers over the control of their own production, and that a starting point for us to achieve that in our current system is through the implementation of worker cooperatives and worker unions. The Italian region of Emilia-Romagna is where 1/3 of the GDP is successfully produced through worker co-ops, and the 5th largest umbrella corporation in Spain, known as Mondragon, are 2 examples of such systems working efficiently. Now, I may just be a low IQ individual, but that doesn't take a lot of brain horoscopes to know the simple fact that our understanding of the universe evolves over time. Alchemy gave way to chemistry, as astrology gave way to astronomy, so too can our economic system evolve to one that is more democratic, more efficient, less exploitative, and better for every member of the human race.
You got it. Thank you very much, Lance, for that opening statement as well.
We are going to jump into the open conversation, folks. I want to remind you we have many juicy debates coming up. As you can see, for example, at the bottom